a few. Hello to everyone. Hey to everyone joining. I'm here with the amazing, the one and only Charlie. And we're just going to take a brief moment to set everything up well. So I'm just going to make sure that we go live also on Instagram. And Shivani from my team, can you let me know that we're live and good to go on all platforms? Okay. So, sorry, a bit of technical stuff here. Yes, okay. So Shivani confirmed that we're all good. So Charlie, thank you so much for taking the time to come today and to spend this moment together. Um, would you like to take a moment to introduce yourself so that our listeners can get to know you a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for the invitation as well, Meytal, to be here. I'm really excited about the conversation, and I'm really thrilled to be here. And yeah, my name's Charlie Brittain. I have kind of quite a diverse relationship to movement and to health. I'm a dancer and a performer, and I'm still very actively performing in that sense. But I'm also a health practitioner, and my background started in kind of sports therapy, which is a kind of body work, really focused on the fascia and musculoskeletal health and how to help people move better and deal with injuries. And then I kind of fell more and more into movement as a therapy. And I'm not a movement therapist, but I mean that in terms of rehabilitation and how movement can really start to be the main way to address injuries. So I still practice as a body worker, but I would say the balance has switched very strongly towards movement. And that led me to study biomechanics and a lot of different kind of approaches to movement, specifically aimed at helping people move better and feel better in their bodies. And then there's a little caveat, which is that I also work in emergency practice, so in emergency care, in the emergency department, and also for the ambulance service in the UK. So responding to emergencies and all of the kind of adrenaline that comes with that as well. So quite a mix of things.
Yeah, I always say that you have like seven seven lives somehow, and you manage to put it all together in one. It's just
Yeah.
amazing. But we've been colleagues for the people listening. We've been colleagues for years now, and we keep on always chatting and talking and exchanging ideas. And for me, Charlie is really the person I would go to when it comes to how everything meets our biology and science and well-being, and his wealth of knowledge is just so profound, and he puts everything together with such a deep understanding of what movement is, because it comes from also from movement, that it's really like I'm so happy that we have you here. Now, before we get started with our conversation, it's going to really tackle healing. So if you are suffering from pain, if you feel stuck in your movement, if you feel that you're on a healing path, or you're a healing nerd, you want to learn to find a deeper sense of well-being inside your body, inside your day, this conversation is a must listen to, because there's some stuff that are so fascinating and so overlooked. And until we don't crack them and really put them into place, it makes it very difficult for us to take the next steps forward in the healing journey. So especially if in any kind of way you feel like you get stuck somewhere along this journey, this conversation is golden. So make sure to stay and to soak in Charlie's wisdom. But for a moment before we do that, I was politely asking Charlie, and he said it's okay, because just today we've had a couple of questions coming in our way about the Fathom High tribe, and I want to make sure I tackle them in case that this is something that you listening now and tuning in is something that you're also having in your mind. So the Fathom High Tribe, which is my signature program, which is where I work with people, is now open to welcome new members. And it's open only for the next 2 more days until Friday at midnight. Then we close the doors, and we're currently unsure when we will open them again. Now, the doors of the tribe, they stay closed like this because when we open them, we want to be there for people to welcome them in. And there's extra coaching and connection calls and really things to help people get settled. But now, what is the tribe? If you're just tuning in and you're not familiar with any of this whole thing, so the tribe is an online program that helps you to shed away, to dissolve tensions, to overcome pain, limitation, and to learn to move with a deep sense of freedom, to find creativity. It's a mix of Fathom High, which is a dance technique that I developed from Feldenkrais and dancing. So it's very healing. It opens a lot of new spaces to trust the body again, to overcome pain, and to really learn to find that feeling of ease, like almost unshakable ease that we can experience when moving. Now, I would admit that going live stresses me out a little bit. I want to say it because and Charlie and I were talking before, and he said that he feels a bit the same, right, Charlie? I'm
Absolutely.
outing you a little bit with
Yes.
me. So, just to mention, yeah, we are here and we really want to hold this space to bring in all of these things and this beautiful conversation. Just, it's nice sometimes to say it and to get it out of the way. Now, a few questions that came up today for people were the following. First, about the tribe. A few people shared that they're over the age of 60 and they feel doubtful. Is it for me? Is it not for me? Other people shared, I'm not a dancer. Is it for me? Is it not for me? So you do not need to be a dancer. Dancers should not have a monopoly on dancing, and dancing is healing and such a profound way to connect to your body and to learn to move with freedom. And it should not be, it should not be kept reserved for people that are dancers in that sense. So you do not need to be a dancer. And the tribe is set up in such a way that it meets you exactly where you are in any kind of age. If you're above 60, if you're at 20, if you're above 70, the tribe is set up to meet you exactly where your body is and help to navigate you to a space where you feel more ease and you can overcome pain, tension, limitation, restriction. So don't get discouraged with the age. There's something in this practice, which is why I love it so much, that it's so wholesome, and there's something so inclusive that really, that offers people a deep sense of space there. Now, another thing that came up was some people shared that they're not so much into screens or learning through screens, which I understand. I think though that the tribe is a little bit different, and I can attest to that because I'm also not such a screens person. But the tribe in this kind of work, the teacher is just a voice to listen to. So in fact, you're not in front of a screen. You're in a space that you build with yourself. And all these classes in this kind of format do is that they create a space where this kind of learning and this kind of connection with your body becomes accessible because you have that bridge, you have that person with you there, just this voice that guides you through movement. That said, all the classes, we have this super elaborate library of classes that literally like a GPS for your body. If you have any kind of limitation, it lays out a map of classes to go and do and where to go to next. All of this is video classes, but you will see people usually don't even look at the video. It's just there as some kind of a security. If you're uncertain if you're in the right position or not, that's the extent of how much screen that is. All the work happens with you closing your eyes and taking that moment to be with yourself, with your body. Now, just two more questions. People asked, how actively do I need to be involved in the tribe? as much as you want. Some people enjoy having that sense of community, going to live Zoom classes, and some people just want to practice in their own time and space with the library whenever they have a moment. They don't need the extra stuff, and that's what they're interested in. So the tribe is a plug and play, and it meets you with what you want and need for your life. You are not expected to come to the classes. Everything is recorded. You have access to everything. It's really laid out in this way that makes it very simple for you to just to get that knowledge, this practice, and this transformation. And so it's okay to use only the library. And one last question, people asked if they can join later. So unfortunately, the doors are open until Friday, and we don't know when is the next moment that we'll open them. So those are the kind of questions that we had coming in, and I just wanted to cover them for a second. And I'm so sorry, Charlie, to have kept you waiting so patiently like this.
No, it's
And
super
thank you.
exciting. It's really exciting to hear about it, and yeah, no, it's absolutely fine, no problem.
That's very sweet of you. So, Charlie, as we start out, I wanted to read for a second a little story that one of the participants in the physical mastermind, this training that we just finished doing online, shared after the first training took place. And I'd love for your opinion about this, because he asked, after he shared this, he was like, how does this happen? How could this happen to me? And I told him that we'll get to that later. And I think that I've shared my response to it, but I think it would be so golden to have your input into this. So this is something that Primos, a participant from the physical mastermind, had shared, which is I'm having lower back issues for about 20 years. I had a couple of periods where I could hardly walk. I'm successfully managing to sustain the current state with monthly physiotherapy and daily walks. I tried a lot of different things. I want to share my experience from the first training. After it finished, I noticed a difference, but wasn't sure what it is. During the night, I woke up at 1 a.m. and wanted to change the side I sleep on, the usual way, lifting my pelvis and slowly turning around. Where am I? If I don't do it that way, I feel more pain. That's my usual practice many times during the night. And I was stunned that the pain wasn't present anymore. I was so excited that I had difficulties falling back asleep. And then he says, right now, a day after, I still feel there is something different in my lower back. There is no usual annoyance or slight pain that I feel while sitting. I am surprised that happened in one 15 minutes exercise. It's a miracle for me. So it's just like, it's so brilliant to see people like getting such a taste of what's truly possible for them out there. And Charlie, I would love to pass on the mic to you. I'm blabbering here for a while. Like, how would you explain it to us? Why, like, because the practice that we do is relatively simple. We move slow, it's gentle. How can it create such profound effects? And this is not the only story we've had. We've had so many people reaching out, sharing that their pain is gone, or that they feel a reduction of pain, or that the tension feels dissolving. So how can this work run so deep while it's so simple somehow?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, wow, like what an incredible experience. And I know, because we've been colleagues for so long, I know that that's just one in a whole host of testimonials and responses from people that have met the work that are so positive. It's going to be really hard for me to answer how that happened, because the body is a complex machine, and so much of what's in our body and the way that our body functions is really finely tuned. It's kind of mind-blowing. One of the things that's fascinated me for so long, the reason I for some reason, even after more than a decade of education, can't stop learning about the body is because it's so complex. And yet, what's so beautiful is that the practice of Feldenkrais, the practice of Fathom High, respects the body. There's such an incredible feeling for me of trust in the body being able to heal itself. And I think that sometimes what happens in other approaches to healing or to well-being is that we kind of outsource it. We kind of go to a therapist and say, I'm a bit broken, can you fix me? And also, unfortunately, I think some therapists build an identity around almost being like the mechanic of a car. But my honest experience in working with the body for so long and in different ways is that it's the body itself that is this absolutely incredible, intricate, complex, but also amazingly well-balanced machine. And so when I'm hearing that testimonial, what I'm hearing is that opportunity to sink deeply into a state of listening and to a state of allowing, very likely gave the body some space and also really importantly gave the mind some space to allow healing to take place, to allow the dissolving of that tension. And what we find, especially when we think about the way that the nervous system, so the brain and the nerves of the body control our movement, we think about the idea that where our attention lands, energy goes. So there's a saying by a neuroscientist called Joe Dispenza who talks about where the mind goes, energy flows. And so by taking time to be with the lower back, to be with that state and to really meet it, I find that the listening of it and the being with that space of sensing already allows so much to take place. And oftentimes the body wants release because actually the body, I feel personally, the body has this innate drive towards wholeness. It wants to be integrated. It wants to be moving efficiently because it knows that the ease that comes with that is not only blissful for us in a kind of experiential way, but also allows us to go about our lives in a really whole and open sense. So just by taking the time to listen to that lower back and to be with it for that time, dedicating that time to it, I imagine that a lot already took care of itself in terms of allowing that nervous system to re-regulate. And the other thing to remember is that the body loves patterns. Like the nervous system, the body loves patterns. We're beings of patterns. And so oftentimes what happens is that when we start to move in a specific way, when we do that often enough, it becomes a pattern, it becomes a habit. That habit ends up becoming what we think is our life experience because it's so natural or so seemingly natural that we just go about life thinking, this is how I walk, or this is how I stand, or this is how I carry my bag, this is how I pick up my child. And, 9 times out of 10, that works brilliantly. And there's no problem with that. But sometimes it doesn't. And what that amazing testimonial was talking to was the fact that if these patterns persist, they can lead to years and years and years of tension, pain, discomfort, stress. And often these patterns are so habitual. They're so we can do them so efficiently without even thinking.
Yeah.
That just by taking 15 minutes to really be with that part of the body in our mind, to give space to it, we can almost shine this light of listening somewhere that maybe the nervous system, the brain hasn't consciously connected to for a long time. And the results when you take that degree of listening somewhere in the body are kind of indescribable. They're magical. They're absolutely amazing. So I know I haven't talked maybe about the nitty-gritty of the science there, but that would be my instinct to respond to the question of how did that happen. I mean, the mechanisms will be absolutely many, but the simplicity of the practice talks to a trust in the body. And often clients that I work with sometimes have lost a little bit of that trust because they're living in a body that maybe is uncomfortable, maybe has a lot of pain, maybe doesn't feel like it can do the things that they would like it to be able to do. So sometimes returning to that state of trust and listening and saying, hey, I'm investing in you by listening, and I really trust that you're resilient. I trust that you're strong. I trust that you can move. And that's beautiful because that simplicity of the practice married with the natural intelligence of the body cultivates this sense of trusting. And for me, that trust space is a deeply healing one.
Yeah. It's so beautiful because sometimes I have the feeling, or I see this very often in this work, that people don't know how much they're capable of truly. As you say, because we get accustomed to living inside a yeah, inside specific patterns and ways of moving, that then we just learn to tell ourselves that this is just it, this is what this body is capable of, this is just how I know, this is just how my body knows how to move this. But it's not the reality of things. And there's a whole terrain there, like this, the terrain of potential land, essentially, where you can really change how you move from the core. And if, if the strains fall differently inside your body because you're learning to move differently, then the pain gradually, there's no, that's the cause of the pain usually comes from patterns that strain the body in a certain way that just do not, yeah, that creates too much load and vulnerability
Yeah.
and fragility in certain parts. And it's so brilliant to hear you speak about this. And like throughout the years, us working together, it's been amazing to have you by my side in many different ways. I feel you always with me. um, as we're very close, and to the people listening, like Charlie and I can go on for hours, like to talk about the body, and we have all these nerdy conversations that we could we could dive into. But essentially, like, I would love to hear from your perspective, because for me the tribe is my life's work, and it's where I bring, yeah, all the love that I have to movement and to healing and to supporting others in this process. And you've been there like all along. Now you've never been, you've always been in the tribe because we're colleagues in this way. So I shared with you the tribe, and you've been inside the community, kind of feeling it, and observing people, observing people's stories, and just watching the tribe grows. And I'd love to hear about your experience of, because I think that people hear mainly from me about the tribe.
Yeah.
but
Oh.
but for me that's really meaningful, because I think that when you hear from other people, you get such a wider perspective into something. And I don't know, yeah, would you share a bit with
Totally.
us?
Totally. Um, it's hard to know where to start because for me, it's such an incredibly powerful thing,
Mm,
actually. And it's been such a huge privilege to, like you said, stand by your side and witness and cheer on this amazing evolution. And when I think about where that started, and how that the very beginnings, and maybe you're better placed to talk about the beginnings of it if you want to go there. But when I think about those initial classes, where you were really working out what this thing was, the people were really working out what this thing was, and where it is now, this like incredible full populated platform that is in constant evolution. And the library is constantly evolving. And what's amazing is that I really struggle to think of something that I either see with my own patients or clients, or that I've faced in my own experience of moving, that there isn't a session on, or an approach to within the library in Fathom High, which is amazing. I don't know a library that is so practically geared towards supporting people wherever they are. And what's also really beautiful for me is that, and it links to what we were talking about in the beginning of the conversation, actually, so often what I realize is that the people that come to me are so, one of the biggest blocks to them coming to me for this kind of support is about the idea that they will have to do 6 hours of exercise every day. They'll have to work super hard. They're never going to have time because they're a mother or a professional, or they're dealing with health concerns, and they go, well, actually, I can't change everything about my body. It's, where do I start? Where do I go? And if you've walked a certain way to avoid the knee pain you had when you were 20, and you've walked that way and now you're 60, that's 40 years of being a certain way. And the idea of letting that go is really overwhelming, because you think, well, if it's taken me 40 years to get here, maybe it's going to take me 40 years to get out. And what's amazing about my experience of your work, Meytal, and of being involved in the tribe is that you get these momentary shifts, and that testimonial that you read says it all. 20 years of back pain, and in one session, it's this kind of amazing tectonic shift. That's also what's really special, is that it's so responsive, and because the work is so deep on a kind of neurological and pattern-based level, you see the result really, really quickly. And what people often say, and just for the context of the people listening, over the years, I've often pointed people in Meytal's direction as someone to go and, you really need to experience this work. And I often refer a lot of people to the platform or to you. And what people always say is how amazed they are that it almost, in the moment of doing the work, it almost feels that you're in such a state of awareness that you're not, there's almost nothing to do. There's nothing to achieve. It's not an attainment driven practice. It's a practice that is really about honoring and meeting yourself where you are. But it's in that really amazing, quite intense, but also very soft space that these changes take place. And people often get back to me and say, oh my goodness, like it felt like I did nothing, but when I stood up, everything had changed. And I think that's the other thing about the work that feels really powerful. But the tribe itself, what's also been beautiful is to experience the way that the community has grown, and there's such a lot of support. And I know sometimes, you and the team are super responsive. That's what's amazing. But, sometimes people will ask questions in the community, and, within a minute, someone will have responded from within the community. And that's been really beautiful to witness as well, is that, this environment, which is people that just want to feel better, move better, and kind of offer something to themselves that they can't find anywhere else, has just become a real kind of healthy, positive environment. And I think that it cultivates this kind of motivation to be part of that experience, which is also really beautiful.
Wow, thank you so much for this. Do you know, like for me, it did evolve, like from giving these classes in Zoom during COVID just to help people because we were all at home and nothing could move anywhere, and into what it is now, which is this whole universe. And yeah, and the thing that kept on driving me forward, which makes me so freaking happy that you say this now, is the fact that when I was at the time, going through this physical journey and going through learning Feldenkrais at the time, and when I was starting out, let's say, for me, there was every time I would go to, I already started my studies to become a Feldenkrais teacher. And every time I would go to the training there, something would shift so profoundly in me, because I would have the space to be inside a place where I do not feel judged, where I do not feel like I have to be something that I am not. And through these two actions that are so simple but so hard and so non-given in our culture, they actually heal me. They actually teach me to move better. They give me better results. And they also allow me to finally, after years as a dancer, standing in front of a mirror, constantly being guided to how I should feel like and how I should move like, then to a space where you reclaim the authority on your body, and your body truly becomes yours. And this is not something, I think, that in our culture we fully grasp somehow. And for me, that became the goal of how do I create this kind of space for other people, because this is what I needed more than anything. I needed the healing after I had my car accident, but I really needed the support, and I really needed to do this in a way that feels like I'm not constantly being asked to be something that I am not, constantly trying to be pushed with my body to take it to a direction that doesn't suit me, or to pull it somewhere else, or to push through that limitation, and for me, it's so brilliant that you say that, and it's true. It's so beautiful. Every time that a triber jumps in and responds and says, someone asks, "Hey guys, like I have this and this. What do you think?" And someone jumps in and said, "I did this. That helped me." And it's just like it's so lovely. It's so lovely that there's that kind of a yeah that there's that kind of a support or a community that's really based on kindness, where you don't feel like you need to try to be someone that you're not.
Mm,
And
mm,
so
totally,
it's
totally.
so beautiful how it all ties into healing, because I think that
Yeah.
yeah.
Even being in a community, through the platform and through the kind of community of the tribe, that you're around people that have similar motivations, and actually, then everyone's motivation is completely unique. Everyone has gone through such specific things in their life, but there's some kind of communal engagement in offering yourself something for your body, offering yourself something for your mind, offering yourself, as you said, all of the amazing healing that can come from just being in a place where expectation and dictation is not actually on the agenda. That is super liberating. And I think it's very difficult to separate mind, body, and emotion, actually. So just being in that space, for me, feels really restorative. And then you add moving into the mix, and the kind of amazing experiences that come as a result of the actual classes, or the different explorations in the platform. And I mean, it's just a cocktail for health, really, for well-being. And I think it's all, as you say, all of those different things come together into something that is really, really unique. And yeah, like full, very full. Every class is full, every conversation is full. And yet, I don't mean full in terms of overwhelm. Actually, it's very much about space. And as you said, like, people can engage in exactly the way they want. There's no expectation on anyone. But that means that those interactions are really authentic, because they're not expected. So therefore, when people do interact, it feels like it's a very genuine, communal thing, and it's really beautiful.
Mm, yeah. And there was something that I was really hoping to get into with you today, because we just recently concluded the training of the physical mastermind.
Mm.
And for those of you that have attended the training and are watching this, I think that this also conversation, like, we're going to dive a little bit into how tension influences the biology and well-being and healing and stress. So it's really, I feel that everything that we've explored together during the training is really met so beautifully. And Charlie and I have been bouncing some ideas on topics that we'd like to cover before they started. So I'm really, really excited to share all of this with you guys. So I would love to dive in, starting maybe with the topic of stress,
Mm.
which is something that you brought to the table today when we met earlier, and the way that stress. Maybe I will just let you actually lead on this one, because you came up with it was so authentic as it was.
Yeah, yeah. I think that what I'm realizing a lot, and what I've observed in my practice as a movement person and as a human in the world, and the majority of my interaction with the world is in the West and in Central Europe or Western Europe. And I think stress is something that is, if we look at research and we look at data, like the increasing incidence, the increasing likelihood that people will get chronic disease as a result, you can trace it back kind of to chronic stress, is crazy. It's almost, and you'll hear people talk about a stress epidemic, that we've never been more stressed, and that our resilience to stress is becoming lower. And I thought it would be a really interesting thing to talk about, because I think that it's a really hot topic at the moment. And anyone that is engaging in social media, or even just the news, or any kind of online thing, probably comes across this topic of stress quite a lot. If it's not in their own life, it might be in someone that they know, or it might be in reading an article or an Instagram video or whatever goes on in social media, which is a lot. And I think that it can be really overwhelming because it's something that's bandied around a lot, but the actual process of stress is something that I don't think is brilliantly understood. And I think if we can understand a little bit about what the implication of being stressed is, then we can start to understand why movement, and especially movement like you can access through Feldenkrais or through Fathom High, is such a brilliant tonic for it, such a brilliant kind of way to support ourselves in an environment like that. So I guess maybe I could talk briefly about what stress really is without
Wonderful. Bring it on.
It's essentially stress, which a lot of people talk about, and I sometimes feel is poorly understood. So, when we go through the world, our senses, our nervous system is constantly gathering information. Everything we see, everything we hear, we taste, we touch, we smell, all of that information is constantly being digested and processed by this incredible kind of computer of the brain. And when the senses take in information that is identified to be harmful, potentially harmful, like threatening, and I'm talking about a car zooming down the street towards you, or a damaging taste, something that tastes like it's gone off or it's rotten, or a dangerous animal, or anything that your brain perceives as a potential threat. An area in your brain called the amygdala, and I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty of all the anatomy, but there's an area in your brain whose job is emotional processing, basically. And when this emotional processor realizes that there's a potential threat, it sets off this distress signal, almost like an SOS. The image in my head is this like red flashing light and the siren going, wah, 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 like potential danger, and of course humans are built to survive. So there's a response that we've evolved with to meet these situations. And that distress signal sets off this cascade of responses in the body, which I won't go into the detail of, but the downstream effects of that distress signal is a response to get ready, basically, to ready the body almost instantly for either fighting, physical energy to fight, or to flee, to run away. And that's what everyone, or most people, probably would have heard of as the fight or flight response. And that's an arm of the nervous system whose job it is to make us ready for these threats. And we do that by releasing a lot of adrenaline into the blood. And what that does is it makes our heart beat fast. It makes our blood vessels constrict to keep the pressure up. It widens all the airways in our lungs so we can get more oxygen. It's a really amazing and very full-bodied response. And we recognize that by the butterflies in our stomach, by our breathing speeding up, by feeling the awareness of our heart beating in our chest, which are all things that I think we can probably relate to. And that what that does basically is the nervous system goes into a mode where it's pushing the gas pedal. It's rallying energy. We're mobilizing all of our stored energy through fats or through sugars to give energy to the body to suddenly burst into a whole load of activity. And the other thing to say is that I think that culturally sometimes we demonize stress. We talk about it, we think of it always as a negative thing. And of course, chronically being stressed, staying in that absolutely pumped, kind of revved up state long term, of course, has really negative health benefits. But stress itself as a response is absolutely essential to stay alive. So it's really important that we don't consider the response as a negative. What becomes negative for our health is staying long term in that state, or jumping into that state at the drop of a hat, not having what we would call stress resilience, or stress tolerance, where the slightest trigger flips us into that absolutely revved up, high adrenaline, high cortisol, hormone fueled readiness to essentially fight for our lives. That's what the body's readying itself for.
Yeah.
And I think what's important about this in the modern age, especially in Western culture, is that what triggers that response is in many ways not as important as the response itself. And what I mean by that is that if we zoom back in history to the days when we were gathering food or hunting or, walking out in the wilderness and the tiger walked past, what would happen? Well, that response would happen almost identically to how it happens to us in the modern day, but we would then fight or run. All of those mobilized energy stores, all of those hormones would be utilized. So there would be a physicalization, a kind of physicality that would utilize that. And what would happen is because all of that was being utilized and responded to, the stress hormones would drop and then the body would regulate itself again because the nervous system would realize, okay, the brain would get the message, we're not in danger anymore, and you would drop back to baseline. The reason I think that it's so important to be aware of stress in the modern age is that, I mean, I live in central London, so it's been a while since a saber-toothed tiger has walked across the street towards me, The things that cause stress in the modern day are very different. And if you think about our air quality, getting an email from your boss that is really stressful, if you think about going to a job 8 hours a day, maybe 5 or 6 days a week, if you think about how long we stay sat in one position, if you think about the financial pressures that we're under, if you think about global politics, I mean, I don't even want to go there in the context of this conversation, but if you think about all the things that cause our stress response in the modern world, and you think about how often we could end up in that fight or flight state as a result of those stresses, that goes some way to illustrate the mass effect that stress can have on our health. Because when we stay in that state chronically for a long time, or when we go into it regularly without coming down from it, then we start to see that the health implications that come as a result of that. And those are things like digestive problems. Your risk of cardiovascular disease gets greater, your risk of heart disease, we can link it to all of these problems: anxiety, depression, mood disorders. So again, the stress response is absolutely vital, and it's the most amazing thing that we've evolved for, but we don't want to live in it. And I think in the modern world, we're constantly exposed to things that can trigger us into it. And that's why I personally think it's never been more important for humans to take agency over their well-being. And for me, one of the most important ways to do that is to actively invest time in re-regulating that response, in activating that rest, digest, heal response. And also, not to sound like a broken record, but that's why havens like the Fathom High Tribe or the platform and the library are so needed and so valuable in the modern world, because our relationship to stress is very different than it ever was. And I don't want to talk much longer because I've been monologuing, but if you think for a moment about how slow the evolutionary process is, it's absolutely progressive. We're absolutely progressing with each generation in terms of evolution, but it takes time. It takes hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of years. But if you think about when industry suddenly took off, and when technology, social media, iPhones, computers took off, it's almost that there was nothing, and then it almost went on an upward spike. But our evolution has been progressing steadily and slowly since humans were humans, really. And that's why, if you think of our body as a kind of ancient technology, we're kind of we've got ancient technology in a modern world. And actually, from a physiological point of view, we're not really equipped to be responding to the degree of stress and the caliber of stress as regularly as perhaps we are exposed to in our modern lifestyles, which is why I can't talk enough about offering ourselves the opportunity to be well by taking that space to listen to the body, to breathe, to go slow. it's just so important.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true, and I think that oftentimes also people struggle because we're all aware of stress, and we're giving this notion of just, to meditate and to breathe, and all of these are incredible techniques that are so powerful and wonderful, and I'm in no kind of way going against them. They are so powerful.
Mm.
Yet, as you said, we have the stress response cycle. And what any animal does in nature is that after there's that stress response, there's that fight or flight mode getting activated, that animal would always move. It would shake, it would run, it would shiver, it would do
Mm-hmm.
anything that has to do with moving to expel the stress out of its system. So
Yeah.
movement is imperative in the process of shedding away stress. And I think that this is somehow sometimes that missing link. We just need that extra
Yeah.
bridge there that helps us to land our nervous system back into safety,
Yeah.
which is why, like, recently for the tribers, we created this whole section in the library with classes that are essentially meditations in movement.
Mm.
So I've been doing a lot of research on taking science-based tools like peripheral vision, like loosening there's a lot of stuff, but it's amazing because whenever you're stressed, and your body can assimilate stress even just by staring at a screen, or like that kind of
Yeah.
zoning in and all of that, your body mimics a certain behavior. But
Mm.
when physically you introduce tools that speaks ease and safety to
Mm.
your nervous system, this is a game changer.
Mhm.
And these meditations in movement are essentially taking these science-based tools to
Mhm.
help through movement to find that nervous system reset, where your nervous system lands back into the parasympathetic
Mhm.
nervous system, where that gets activated, which is where restoration, healing happens, which is
Absolutely.
where you feel you can breathe again and really relax.
Yeah.
And this is such a, yeah, to to constantly deny the body of movement and trying to resolve it through our minds, because we are very oriented on thinking
Mhm.
very
Mhm.
often, and we try to rationalize and problem solve things through thinking.
Yeah.
But your body, if your body's stuck in the same pattern of survival,
Mm.
that's not going to get resolved by you thinking a
Mm.
certain thought. It's going to get resolved by your body learning a different way
Yeah.
of being. And there's
Absolutely.
no,
Yeah.
yeah,
No, sorry, Meytal. I was just gonna say and add to that, you know, our experience of the world is bodily. It's bodily, and you know, all of the information that we know about the world we're in, whether it's situational, environmental, it's all physical. If you subscribe to the idea that it's coming in through the senses, your vision, your sense of taste, touch, but breathing is movement. Breathing is movement. Sitting is movement. Getting out of bed is movement. Lifting your child is movement. Walking is movement. And in biomechanics, we talk a lot about the concept that we're evolved to stand and we're evolved to move. So the body will orientate itself to make sure that we don't fall over, and also to make sure that we can get moving, that we're able to walk. It's a fundamental of human evolution. And I guess all I would say is that we know, and it's something that Moshe Feldenkrais, the founder of Feldenkrais, talked a lot about, and it's absolutely backed by neuroscience research, that when your brain cells fire, even if they're firing, say you've got two bits of information coming in, so you're feeling stressed, and you happen to, at the time of feeling stressed, be bending forwards. Well, if both of those brain cells, and I'm grossly oversimplifying, so if there's any scientific people listening, forgive me, but if the brain cells that are firing to help you lean forward, or to fire that pattern of leaning forward, are firing at the same time as you're feeling stressed, we know that brain cells that fire at the same time start to connect. So yes, it's an oversimplification, but it's also real that we are going to associate through movement different emotional states, different stress responses. So the idea that, we can come out of the body and think our way through these responses, for me, we miss an absolutely pivotal and imperative part of it, which is movement. Because actually there's nothing that we're going to practice more. There's nothing that we're going to do more often than breathing and walking and rolling out of bed. So if we're not addressing these states from within movements, then we're not giving the opportunity for the body to embed them in our lived
Yeah.
experience of the world, which is through motion. So yeah, just that idea of the fact that whatever you're doing at the time that you experience these things, they kind of get patterned together. So if every time you bend forward you have pain, then you start to associate pain with bending forward. That affects the way you move. And then, there's just a myriad, there's an infinite number of these links. So we can't talk about them all, but that as a principle for me, it just adds so much importance to involving movement in the process of healing, whether that is pain, psychological well-being, social well-being, physical well-being. It's just, it holds all of it.
Yeah. There is this question coming in from Shuruchi Sharma that asks, if we are living in a chronic stress situation or working through complex PTSD, how can Feldenkrais/Fathom High work help? Maybe I'm going to leave this to you, Charlie, as the...
Amazing. I'm going to tag in. Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question, and again, there's so many ways that it can help. I think the complex PTSD is a really specific situation. So I can't talk specifically to one person's situation without knowing more. But you mentioned chronic stress in there, Suruchi, and if you think about being in that revved up state, that your nervous system is in that kind of sense of overdrive, we call it a sympathetic drive, a fight or flight response, either chronically or very often. Feldenkrais and Fathom High offers this amazing opportunity to sink into stillness and listening. And one of the things that happens when you're in a chronic stressed situation is that you stop, or your nervous system stops giving energy, it stops giving resources to anything that isn't absolutely essential to your survival. And so Meytal mentioned the vision, but one of the things we do is we get tunnel vision. We focus absolutely on the thing that we're going to need to survive, which is why working with the vision and the peripheral vision is such a brilliant way to reorientate the nervous system. But if you think about being in that chronically stressed situation, Fathom High Feldenkrais offers these amazing opportunities to find a way in to the opposite. The nervous system works, or the autonomic nervous system works in this very perfectly balanced system, which is the fight or flight response, which is directly, we call it inhibited. It's directly countered by the parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest. So if you think that you're always living up here, Fathom High Feldenkrais can start to really give you access to a load of resources and a load of space in the thing that will counter that chronic stress response. And the more you access the other state, the more easy it is to access the other state, and the longer you can stay in the other state. And that's where over time you start to see this rebalancing of that stress system. So yeah, does that help? Did I answer the question?
Brilliantly.
Okay.
Yeah. And Judith is saying, thank you both. Thank you, Judith. I have carpal tunnel both hands, 3DR, 3 doctor recommended surgery. It might started from the neck, C2, 3, 4, but the problem is in the hands. Will that help me? Will this practice help me?
Amazing question. Again, a really specific one, and I have to be slightly careful of kind of promising
anything, of course.
But what I would say is that in my experience of working both in kind of more conventional medical practice and also within movement practice of musculoskeletal health, oftentimes things that have manifested as really specific pathologies like carpal tunnel, if you present with a certain constellation of symptoms, we're really quick to label it and say, okay, that's this thing. It can go in that box. And what I have found is that oftentimes conventional medicine gets to that point and then looks to solve it. And what it hasn't done is looked at what's caused it necessarily. So we know carpal tunnel exists and we know what it looks like. So therefore we can diagnose it and then we can treat it. But for me, the missing link, which is why I've been so fascinated by work like Feldenkrais and by the kind of biomechanics that I practice, which is very much grounded in looking at the cause of things. What I've often found is that by looking at those causative patterns, I mean, you mentioned that it might start in your neck. Well, and I have to be really careful again, like it's only a what if, but I think it's a very real what if. Or what if there was something in the method that helped support the ease in your neck, or to downregulate tension that might be causing pressure on those nerves? I think it's really possible and very plausible. And I have to say, I've witnessed quite staggering transformations of things that people had kind of given up on or resolved themselves that they'll be a certain way because a certain practitioner said they would. Have quite amazing responses to the work. So will it help you specifically? I honestly couldn't say. It would be unfair of me to say, but my instinct is it may well do, and I would be really curious to know if there was anything in the work that could support you. So my professional opinion is it's absolutely possible, but I could never say for sure.
Yeah, of course, and it's lovely that you're so honest and careful and responsible in the way that you reply. And I think that for people that are here tuning in and listening and might have different physical challenges, like an injury in your back or pain in your foot. So let's take, for example, this pain in your foot. It has a lot to do with the way that you're weight bearing. So the way that the weight falls into one specific part of your foot and constantly kind of grinds into that point again and again. So the pain is caused because of the way that we move. And in many cases, of course, there's instances where you get hit, you fall down, those are different kind of injuries, but those injuries are building over time because of the way that you move. But if you learn to create more mobility inside your foot, when you're walking, the weight bearing would be more smooth inside your foot. How would that influence the way that the weight falls and triggers that specific point in your foot, for example? Or lower back pain, the way that you're bearing weight through the spine. Does it grind into that point in your back, or can it distribute through your physical structure, through your bone structure to support you? So all of this is really what I love about this stuff that gets me nerd out for hours sometimes, is that it's also mechanical stuff, it's loads, it strains, it makes sense when you put the pieces together in this way. But what I love about it most actually is the fact that it stays very physical. The questions are always very physical, like what's touching the floor, what's not. Simple stuff, not like brain science kind of stuff. Simple stuff that anyone can do and listen to their body in this way. But what it creates is this deep connection to your body, is that deep nervous system reset, is that creativity, that joy in movement. That is so much power. So it's such a powerhouse beyond just how it leans into the floor.
Absolutely.
So
I don't know about you, Meytal, also as a practitioner, as someone working in this field. But what I often also have realized over years of practice is that, the nervous system is so brilliant at responding and reordering that oftentimes, a client will come to me that's had back pain for 20 years, and I'll take them back through the significant things they remember about the injury or about any injury, because often where the pain manifests is not really the root of the problem. I would say actually it's very rare when people come to me with lower back pain, for example, for me to find a lower back problem. But what I often find is a stiff foot that is causing stress in the lower back, or
Yeah.
neck that can't rotate, so the back is trying to compensate, or a poor breathing pattern that means that the pelvis is tipping a certain way to try and make space, which is causing strain somewhere else. And what's really amazing is that a lot of times I'll work with clients where actually, once we do some work on repatterning, and once we do some work on reorganizing, giving the nervous system an opportunity to sense what's real now, which is what Fathom High and Feldenkrais is all about, oftentimes what we find is that the pain that they had actually was like a leftover. They hurt their knee, so they started to move in a certain way to prevent the knee being painful. Well, the knee recovered. The actual injury or the actual strain recovered, but because the nervous system loves patterns, which is what we said
Yeah.
earlier, it held on to that pattern, and they did it so much that became their new habit. And actually, the knee was no longer an issue, the lower back was an issue, but it stemmed from something that actually had healed. And what's amazing is that when the body realizes that there's no need for it to hold that tension anymore, it's so willing to let it go. And
Oh my
that's
God. That's so
staggering.
beautiful.
That's when you get these staggering kind of momentary results. And it's amazing for
Yeah.
clients to realize what they think has been damaged for 20 years has actually been something that a pattern or a tension that's been held on to. And it's amazing. And actually, we also have to again think that it's incredible that the body is able to so intelligently move around pain as well. So it's not a negative thing that it adopted that pattern, but again, it's not needed now. And it's almost,
Yeah.
I always see it, and I almost describe it to clients as a kind of updating. Like, we just need to bring
Yeah.
where the body thinks it is to where it really is in the present moment. And that's what's so beautiful about the practices in the library, is that it's almost like this opportunity to be present, and therefore to keep updating your movement pattern, to keep updating your nervous system. And that means that you can
Yeah.
let go of anything that is no longer serving the way that you express yourself in the world. And it's really powerful. So yeah.
Absolutely. And it's, like you did added the question, would I know what exercise from the tribe, from the library I need to do? So that's what I love about the library. Yes, you will know because everything is laid out for you. Like, and if there's a very specific condition, we can always then tell you what to go and work on. But for most challenges that people face, there's really a plan there, and the plan is not only, it
Mm,
doesn't stay on small details, but it tells you where to go to next because of this. Because usually with lower back tension, I see people suffering from less mobility in their hips. So think every time you need to climb the stairs, how
absolutely.
much work your lower back needs to do, or
Yeah.
stiffness, rigidness in the chest that influences the back. There's some tensioning diaphragm, holdings in the belly. So everything, like, it gives you, it literally tells you, you finish that series of classes for your back, it tells you where should you go to next. Okay, so usually people that suffer from this in the back, they also see less mobility in the hips and more tension in the chest, and it lays out a map for you of where you need to go to. And in each kind of section, everything, you just have all the classes that are literally laid out there for you. And we've been researching this for months, and we keep on working. This is what I love about it. This is my thing in life. If someone would tell me, you now need to sit down and do this for, like, yeah, go to a go to an island, sit on your own with a coconut tree. Well, maybe I'd enjoy also staring at the ocean a bit. But still, like, if you need to do one thing, what would it be? I would go, like, I would nerd out on movement. And then I'm like, okay, so what do we need here to really free this part? And
Mm,
we keep on bringing in, like, just the other day I was teaching this class to really release shoulders, and we turned it into a short class that is coming out this Friday, just 8 minutes, and just you finish it and you just feel like both shoulders are just kind of
mm,
falling into place. So all of this right away goes to all the right places in the library where this action is needed, where this is helpful. So everything is like this alive,
mm,
dynamic space where people can get a really practical response to their physical needs, which is kind of my excitement in life.
Yeah, and also like, from the biomechanic perspective, from the kind of this evidence-based perspective, we talked about it in the beginning, but the body is so incredibly intricately integrated that question of where should I start? Well, it's really amazing because the effect, and I'm just, I could talk now for like 10 hours about fascia and about all the biomechanic connections of the body and how they all work together. But I mean, to the degree of my knowledge, which is not, I don't know everything at all, but the intricacy and the interconnectedness of the body is so key, because actually, I've got neck pain. Well, actually, it might be that you do the ankle, you do something just because you're curious about ankle movement, and it has the most profound effect on your neck. Or, as you said, the softness in the chest that relieves the lower back. Or I couldn't agree more, Meytal, about, hip tension and lower back pain, and the inability to access that range of motion, and the effect that has on the body. So it's almost like you could look at anything, and it looks like it's a limitless. And this is what's amazing about the platform as well, is that it's constantly evolving. There's always new classes added, new kind of physical questions being answered or asked. It's really dynamic. And yet what I find is that somehow it all affects everything in a way, and that's because of the integration of that. You release some tension in the front of your ankle, but actually the way that the body works means that there's no way that couldn't affect the rotation in your lower back, the ease in your pelvis, the alignment of your shoulders. And that's the basis of myofascial therapies, and also the basis of modern biomechanics, is that actually the integration of the body is something that we take really seriously. And so actually it doesn't matter, in a way, it doesn't matter which part of the knot you pull on, but it kind of unravels. But the idea that you can do a class and then you can, I mean, I'm talking really personally now, but the idea that you can do a class on a certain topic and it has a plan of where to go next is just amazing. And you can really deep dive, or you can pick and mix, and those
Exactly.
ways of interacting are really cool, really, really cool.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's one of the things that I appreciate, because it's set up also for busy people that maybe have only 20 minutes, 15 minutes. So there's snacks, the short classes, there's ways there that you can really get this practice and get its most benefit without feeling overwhelmed time-wise, that it would feel like very time consuming, that it would feel hard. But
Mm.
the funny thing is that essentially, it's been a couple of years that I've been constantly, people ask me, okay, so I have this, I have XYZ, what should I do? And I'm like, okay, so go and do this, then though, go and do this, and and then I remember there was a moment I was walking in the street, I was like, hang on a minute. What? And just like it felt like, like this kind of realization, why don't I literally map out the whole thing for everyone? And then it was like, my brain just started running, and it's a little bit like a Neo thing I started to see. And I have this document that for months I would put everything together there and work on the strategy. And it just,
Yeah.
yeah, it's exciting, because I think that oftentimes we get limited in our perspective and in our ability to meet a problem. But when knowledge is power, and if you understand things deeper, and you become wiser in terms of how you move, you're
Mm.
able, basically you learn to be able to troubleshoot things also more and more, and you regain this autonomy
Mm.
that could be rightfully yours in terms of how you meet physical challenges.
Yeah.
And that freaking excites me, like
Mm.
that yeah.
So exciting. So empowering as well, I think
Exactly.
one of the hugest things in my experience as a therapist was this amazing realization that actually, my hand, in my case, it was my hands. Now it's much more to do with movement. That might help you know where to look, but it's your body, it's your system that is doing the healing. And I think that when people understand that they have access to this, it feels infinite possibility of kind of resource to heal. It's such a lifelong thing, because we're constantly taking on more and releasing and taking on and releasing. But when you realize that there can be a kind of softness to the idea that your body has the answer to it, and a practice that holds you in a space that feels safe enough to just really allow, it's just so empowering. Because again, I alluded it, I spoke briefly about it in the beginning, but this idea that we go to someone else to be fixed totally disempowers the idea that we are absolutely hardwired physiologically to heal, to recover. We have that innate ability. It's the most incredible thing. And what's sad is that I think that we are in a situation often societally where we're so used to going somewhere else for something, whether that's somewhere else for entertainment, somewhere else for learning, somewhere else for shopping, somewhere else for exercising. We almost forget that this has the most incredible innate intelligence. And what's beautiful is that the practice really honors and allows that intelligence to do the work. And that's what I find so incredible about it, and so inspiring as well. And that's what feels really unique and also completely communal at the same time.
Amen. Amen. And what would you say to someone that still says like, but what if I'm not fixable? What if I'm, because I think it's hard for people to wrap their heads around the thought. We are so accustomed to look for answers on the outside.
Yeah.
And to really have a complete belief that we will not be able to solve this, because maybe people have been in the problem for years now. Sometimes physical problems can persist for so long until it feels like this is a second nature and this is the only way I could move and live in the world. So for a person that's been feeling that for a long time, to shift their belief to a point where they feel that actually I've got this, or my body's able to help me find the way out. What can you say to people that are in that place, in that one place of the habit of the pain, and wanting to find that trust and that safety for themselves, and not fully believing that might be possible for them?
It's a really good question. I think the first thing that's really important to acknowledge is that it's absolutely real. It's absolutely real. That feeling of not being able to move forward, that feeling of stress, of pain, of the idea that it's gone on for so long you don't believe that you might be able to get out of it. It's absolutely real. It's absolutely real. That's the first thing, because I think acknowledging the intensity of that is really important. The other thing I'd say is that I believe, as a result of all the things I've done and also my personal beliefs, that perception in itself is also neurological. The way that we think, which is, these like brain cells firing off together, creating these thoughts, these perceptions around the world, that's also neurological. So the idea of our movement patterns being absolutely second nature also for me applies to our perception and to the way that we think about the world, the way that we perceive pain, the way that we think about pain. And a lot of pain is a really, really complex scientific area, but a huge part of it that we realize is absolutely pivotal to it is perception. Actually, the perception of pain and the projection, the expectation of pain. So if you're in a situation where it's happened for so long and you now believe that it's so not going to go anywhere, there's almost a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, which is that perception of it is the very thing that might be holding you back. And it's really delicate. And that's why I started with that first statement, that it's absolutely real, because I think oftentimes for someone to come in guns blazing and say, oh, it's just your perception, you're limited by your beliefs, that can actually feel really dismissive. So I think the first thing is to say it's absolutely real, it's incredibly difficult, and it's a really personal journey. But what I would add to that is that thinking your way out of a physical problem, for me, and this is personal, just delineating the personal from the evidence-based, but for me, thinking your way out of a physical problem can only get you so far, because it's almost like, you know, you want to paint a picture of the sea, but you've only got red paint. It's almost like it can't do that job. So for me, the empowerment comes from going, well, actually, why don't we just listen? Why don't we come into a space where we haven't got an agenda to change your life, to fix your problems? All of that might happen, but we're not sitting down, we're not lying down on the floor with an agenda. First of all, that's a really alien thing for people that have gone to a physiotherapist, for example, who've been told, oh, you need to do these exercises this many times and it's going to solve this problem. Well, the idea of listening to the body, when actually our relationship to the body is often so much about doing things. Well, what's the body telling you? First of all, that's a big shift. And what I would also say is that, you know, if you've been in that perception and that idea that you can't move on for so long, again, it happens in a real kind of mindset, brainy place. And that's not to say that what you're feeling isn't real, because it is, but the decision you've made about it has happened up here. So for me, I would say, well, what's the space in the body to meet this problem? Because it's almost like the body's got the resource for that thing, you know. And again, it's the painting analogy, you know, if you want to paint the sun, you know, green paint maybe isn't the way to go. So if the brain has got to a blockage, well, what's the body got to say about it? What if we went to a bodily place and we asked the body to interact with that movement pattern, to interact with that stiffness, to interact with that tension, you know? And yeah, it's an amazing thing, because the body doesn't speak in words. I think the body speaks. I think the body totally talks. And actually, an amazing thing is when we get to the point where we take our body's signals really seriously. I think that's really an amazing thing. But it doesn't speak necessarily in words. And for those of us, myself included, that have gone through life thinking that this mind-based perception of the world is in the first place, and it's what we've been conditioned to think as well. It's absolutely what we've been conditioned to think, that the mind is in first place and the body is almost just the vehicle for our mind, you know. And I think if you dare, and it sometimes takes quite a lot of courage, but if you dare just to consider what it would be like if that hierarchy was different, sometimes you get the most incredible experiences and releases. So that's, I guess, what I would say is maybe the reason it feels like you can't get anywhere is because we've been looking for the mind to provide a resource that the body is actually perfectly positioned to provide. So maybe it's not about if, but it's about how.
Amen. Oh, so beautiful. You know, I always speak with my students and say that we almost always have a partial part of the whole picture, just because all of our perspectives are limited by nature. And I think that oftentimes when we meet a problem, we're staring at it from where we're now standing, and there's this whole other domain that's completely hidden by those trees, and that we just, now where we're standing now, we cannot see it. But I think that sometimes, you know, there's almost that thing that we could keep on fighting this body forever, like forever, and people can pass an entire lifetime of struggling with our body and fighting against it. Or we could just kind of like let our hands drop and start to listen, because the body always speaks to you long before it breaks. It always speaks to you. And this is it's a spectrum, and the question is, where do you meet? Where do you start? When do you choose to start to listen? So it's a journey, and maybe we're being called to listen in the hard parts.
Yes.
Or we can learn to listen in the small stuff and work them out there, so that they don't, you know.
And you know, I think it's the same, Meytal. What you're saying is so important. And I think that my perception on movement and injury, especially, or tension, chronic injury, has really been in recent years. It's been this amazing kind of feeling where I've kind of started to ask myself, well, why is it that my body has needed to scream at me to get me to listen? And what I thought was, well, actually, you know, like, if you were in a relationship with someone else and you just dismissed continually the messages they were trying to give you, the things they were trying to say, their perception, their well-being, it would probably end up with this feeling that the only way to get through is to shout loud enough to be heard. And this is an analogy that we talk about in internal family systems, which is a psychotherapy. It's a way of understanding psychology and psychotherapy. It's the same, if you think about why that emotion, or in IFS we would call it a part, needs to scream so loudly. Well, it's probably because you haven't been listening to it while it's been talking normally. And I think the same for me, that analogy goes so much for the body as well. Like you said, if we listen and if we cultivate a relationship with our physicality, which is about listening and honoring and taking seriously in a light, playful way. When I say taking it seriously, I don't mean that it has to be rigid or strict. It can be absolutely playful and dynamic and light, but we give the time and the space to the body to be heard, little and often, visiting it little and often. Then my experience has been that 9 times out of 10, my body doesn't get to the place where it needs to scream at me because I haven't listened to it earlier on. And that's what I think is so beautiful about what you were just saying, is that it's so much about human experience, but we're in a very disembodied conditioning. At least in my upbringing, in my culture in the UK, that's absolutely been my experience. And I would say there was an interesting thing that you spoke to in the beginning about, do I need to be a dancer to engage in the tribe? Well, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But if you are a dancer, did your training give you the opportunity to really listen to the innate responses of your body? Because I feel like my experience in dance, especially earlier on, was actually about ignoring them. It was actually about working so hard that my body was going to become a certain thing or transform a certain way, regardless of whether my hip was telling me that it was too much load, or my hamstring was screaming at me that it was too much intensity, or that my muscles were saying that it can't go on. It was about overcoming, so to say, which I don't believe is a thing, but overcoming those responses. And what's been amazing is that I've never moved better than when I started to listen. And a lot of it was to do with your work, Meytal, actually, I have to say, and my experience of your work very early on in my performing career, and as you were really starting to delve deeply into all of these things, it was a really novel thing to take seriously, that the innate responses of the body, but the kind of space and opportunity that it cultivated in moving was just incredible. So again, my question would be, well, why does your lower back feel the need to scream at you? Rather than trying to meet it with fire. Well, maybe there's a situation where if you hear what it has to say in a physical sense, there might be some movement there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when it comes to listening in this way, I think that we cannot listen in this way if everything is moving fast around us, and if we're moving fast, and if we're doing a million things at the same time. It's just too much. Your nervous system is busy with so many other stimulations. It doesn't have the availability or the vacancy to actually be there and listen and tune in. And this is why I think if we want to really conclude today's conversation, I think this is why this practice is so transformative, because we do not get to listen to our body in this way. And this is what's so, it's so simple, but it's so revolutionary because of our culture. That when we get to listen in this way, and you learn tools to start to rewire the movement, which are specific tools that we use that wake up the brain into this process. Yeah, it's fireworks.
Yeah, totally.
Charlie, listen, we have to we could go on like for
absolutely
for hours, but we have to finish our live. And if we haven't gotten to everything, please write to us and we'll try to respond to you. And Charlie, really thank you so much for joining today. I'm sure that your words and insight and knowledge have really inspired so many of the people that have tuned in. Thank you so very much for taking this time with us.
Thanks for having me. And yeah, super excited to stay with it and see how it all unfolds. It's an amazing time to be a human, actually, when these things are available to us. And for all the negatives of technology, the most amazing thing is that we have access to these kinds of resources wherever we are. There's something also really magical about it, and I'm super excited to see what that can do for us. Really,
Amazing. Thank you so much, Charlie.
pleasure.